Hey, good to see you all. Really, really good. Hope you've enjoyed a little bit of sunshine, managed to get out. It's the best time of year in Hong Kong, I believe, in terms of weather, in terms of just being able to go out and get some fresh air. Again, we know that things are still not good, but I'm delighted actually to be able to open up the word of God today and the passage that Anthony just read to us. John chapter 8, verse 12. And actually, I am going to share screen just like Pastor Johnny did last week. And hopefully it will work the same for me. And of course, this is some new tech that we have here. Can you see me floating on the slide? We can. And I'm going to make myself a little bit bigger. I don't look as good as Johnny. Seems to have cut a little bit of my hair off, but I will make it work. I'm just going to make myself a little bit bigger just so it's a little bit more overwhelming. There we go. How's that? It's good. I am the light of the world. And it's you know, what a statement to make. And Jesus spoke to them saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. What an audacious statement. Now, we've heard this word before. If you've grown up in church, you will have heard this. You will have sang it. The song that we just sang 10, 15 minutes ago, light of the world, you step down into darkness. So we've heard this word. We know what this means. Do we? Do we actually genuinely know what this means? Or actually, do we take it for granted? Because actually, it's an audacious statement. Can you imagine meeting someone and they tell you that they are the light of the world? Just rewind a little bit of context here of when Jesus said this. He said this just after a major festival in the Jewish tradition. And during that time, they would have had candles everywhere. What do those candles symbolize? Those candles would symbolize or represent the pillar of fire that the Israelites followed during their time in the desert with Moses. And it's in that context, with that backdrop, Jesus says, I know you're seeing these candles right here. I know you're remembering everything that went on with the Israelites back then, but I'm telling you, I am the light of the world. It sounds poetic, it sounds meaningful, we think, but then we wonder, actually, do we truly understand what it means for him to be the light of the world? What does it mean? Is it just an abstract concept, or is there more? And today I want to unpack what this term really means. And my prayer is that we'll leave this call or leave this stream and have a slightly better understanding of what it means when Jesus says he is the light of the world. Because I think there's a more holistic understanding of this, and there's also a much more specific understanding of this that I think we would do well to be able to grasp. See, it's interesting. He says this, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me and will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And then the Pharisees, actually very understandably so, then said, well, you're bearing witness about yourself. Your testimony is not true. He's kind of saying, well, you can't just say this about yourself. You can't just make these kind of statements. You can't just say that you're the light of the world and we're all going to believe you. Why? Why should we believe you? And then Jesus' response is, even if I do bear witness about myself, my testimony is true, for I know where I came from and where I am going. But you do not know where I come from or where I'm going. So he's saying here is, look, I can bear witness about myself because I know where I came from and I know where I'm going. So when I say I am the light of the world, you need to understand that it's got a much bigger meaning that he's trying to reveal here. And so today, that's what we're going to do. As we look at this term, the light of the world, I really feel that there's actually three parts. He says, look, I bear witness by myself, and it's true because I know where I came from and I know where I'm going. And so I want to split this into three simple parts here. When we understand the light of the world, there's really three elements here I want to really unpack. That there's almost a past tense. There's something about where he came from. There's a present tense because he stood there declaring, I am the light of the world. Whoever will follow me now will not walk in darkness. And then there's a future tense. I know where I came from, but I also know where I'm going. So in order to fully understand, or at least we only understand in part right now, but in order to understand more, we need to look into all these elements. And so we'll kick off with the first one, and that is the past. I am the light of the world. You see, when he said that, you need to understand the people who are listening, they know what light means. Electricity's not been invented yet. So when people talk about light, it was often used as a common religious description. it was referring to God. See, when we think about the word light, we're thinking about the flashlight on our phone. We're thinking about the light that we switch on when we go into a room. But what they think of when they hear light is life. The word light and life were very much associated in the very beginning. In the beginning, Genesis 1, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And then what does he say? And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. So when this world was without form, void and dark, there was no life. God utters those 4 words, let there be light. He creates everything by speaking it into existence. Can you see the relationship between light and life here? And actually, he's saying that he's been here in the beginning, right from the very start. When he says he's the light of the world, it's not just right now, shining into your life right now. He's saying, I've been there since the beginning, in the beginning. Where else have we heard those words? In the beginning. What other part of the Bible have we heard those words? They're exactly the same. They mirror it. Of course, it's in the book of John. The book of John starts in the same way. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not made, not anything that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So we see here that Jesus is declaring himself to be a very big deal. He's not just talking about the here and now. He's not talking about, oh, I light up the room because I'm that kind of exuberant extrovert that likes to talk to people. That's not what he's saying. Because he says, I know where I'm coming from, but I know where I'm going. I am the light of the world, and my witness, my testimony about myself is true because I've been there since the beginning. Since the very beginning. And you can see me in your story, Israelites, in your history. You can see me. I just mentioned this in Exodus 13, when they were still wandering. They left Egypt. They were wandering in the wilderness because they hadn't learned what God wanted them to learn. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they may travel by day and night. Can you imagine just being there in the wilderness in the evening? Suddenly you'll just always see this pillar of fire. Just understand that for a second, but also understand and feel the assurance that would have. The one who can create a pillar of fire out of nowhere is with you, and he is guiding you. So we're starting to see the weight. We're starting to see the gravity of what Jesus is saying when he's saying, I am the light of the world. I can say this is true because I know where I came from. I was in the beginning. I was the Spirit of God hovering above the waters. I was the pillar of fire guiding you. Jesus saying, I represent God's presence. I represent God's protection. I represent God's guidance. I'm a big deal. And whilst the Israelites were led through the night, we will be led through the darkness as well. Jesus here is claiming to be this divine presence where he is going to save God's people from bondage. He's going to save God's people from darkness. So do we recognize the magnitude of this declaration? We have to take it seriously. The context of it, the statement demands that we take him seriously because life is so dependent on light. Those of you who know me a little bit, I've told what I used to do before, but before we came to Hong Kong, before we went into full-time ministry, I was a biology teacher. I taught for 7 years in a secondary school teaching biology. Not sure how many of you here like biology. Actually, I personally really wasn't one of them. I probably wasn't that great a teacher either. But so one of the things that you learn in biology, here's a word that you may not have heard in a long time, photosynthesis. Remember what photosynthesis means? That really interesting topic at school where you got to look at plants and you got to draw plants. Photosynthesis is about plants are primary producers, and they then basically they absorb sunlight. The sun is the source of all energy. Actually, we won't be alive were it not for the sun. Because the sun has this light energy that is absorbed by these primary producers, plants, and then they're consumed, and then there are secondary consumers and so forth, and then you go up the food chain until we're eating all of it. That's the magnitude of Jesus' statement here. He's saying, without me, you won't have life. I was there at the beginning, and without me, you won't have life. Now, you've got a choice here. There's this guy who's coming out with this very audacious statement. He says, you know where he came from, and what he's saying is true. Without him, you won't have life. You have a couple of choices here. You can, one, decide that he's a lunatic, that he's just crazy. Okay, fair enough. You believe you're the light of the world, whatever. Second is he could be a fraud. He could be lying. Or the final option is that he really is who he says he is. And for those of us on this call, I trust many of us here believe that Jesus is saying, Jesus actually means what he says, and it's true. His testimony about himself is true. But how often do we truly appreciate that? When we actually so much we treat ourselves as just, I'm seeing there are some real geeks in the chat box. I cannot help myself but just give you a big tick and a sticker for you, Mark and Veronica, for giving us the equation to photosynthesis. Thank you. Anyway, we recognize that without him, that we can't live. He is the light of the world. Acts 17:28 says this, for in him we live and move and have our being. He's the center of everything. Our lives revolve around him. Do we appreciate the magnitude of this statement when he says, I am the light of the world? That's number one. That's the past element to this declaration. The second is the present, because it's not just the fact that he was in the beginning before everything was created. It wasn't just the fact that he could utter words and creation would happen. How many of us would love for just be able to speak things into existence? But Jesus could do that. But it's not just from before. It's not just the pillar of fire in the desert. It's also got a present element to it. There's a very direct implication for the present as well. By declaring he's the light of the world, he's also revealing himself. You see, what else is light associated with? One is associated with life. The second is associated with sight, that we'll be able to see things, right? When you walk into a room and you can't see anything in the nighttime, you switch on the light and then voila, you can see things. It reveals. So light then allows us to have sight. The psalmists would say, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. His word and his name, his Jesus himself, is the one who will guide, who will show us how to walk. There's an importance in there. Not only does it give us life from the past till now, but it also gives us sight. It's revealing right now. When you have light, you will be able to see. C.S. Lewis has this great quote that says, we believe in God like we believe in the sun. Not because we see the sun, but because by the sun, we see everything else. Because by the sun, we see everything else. So when we have the light of the world, we get to see everything else. We get to see the path that we're supposed to walk down. How many of us are currently navigating our lives and going, which way do I go? What do I do? Where do I live? Where do I work? Where do I study? Who should I date? Who should I marry? And Jesus is declaring himself, hey, follow me. I am the way. I am the light. I will be the one that shines a light down the path that you are supposed to take, where you are supposed to go. But it's actually even more than that. When we say that the light of the world has a present element, it's not just the fact he will show us where to go. He is not just a torch. He doesn't just reveal the path. There is more. And in that, finding that, we have to rewind a little bit into the context. So this verse is chapter 8, verse 12. If you just scan up to the beginning of chapter 8, what prompts Jesus to say this audacious declaration? It's a scene that we all know probably very well, and it's the woman who's caught in adultery. She's caught in adultery, and actually at this point, the Pharisees who catch her, they have every right to just stone her to death right there. According to the law, she could be gone already. Yet, actually, good for her, they actually had bigger fish to fry. They didn't want to just stone her. They didn't want to just get her. They wanted to get Jesus. So instead of dealing with her themselves and punishing her and killing her, they take her to Jesus, hoping to set a trap, hoping to get him to expose some of the cracks in what he's thinking so they could expose him. And so they take him to Jesus and say, hey, what do you think? And they test him. And then, of course, we all know Jesus then ignores them, starts walking, starts writing in the sand, and then he says those famous words, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." He almost calls their bluff and sets a trap for them. And then at that point, one by one, they start to leave. And then Jesus stands up and says, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more." And so what can we learn from this passage here, where Jesus is confronted with this trap, and then he says the words to her, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more." And it's directly after this passage, chapter 8, verse 11. From now on, sin no more. And then verse 12, he jumps into it. Again, Jesus spoke to them and said, "I am the light of the world." So when we're thinking about Jesus being the light of the world, it's not just the fact that he gives life. It's not just the fact that he reveals sight. It's also something to do with how we live. The context here tells us it's about our behavior. It's about our actions. It's not just about the path that we're supposed to go down. It's about how we go down it. Because he says, "I'm the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness." So this is the second element here when we're talking about Jesus being the light of the world in the present, is that we cannot walk with him and follow him, but also still walk in darkness. 1 John says, "God is light, and in him is no darkness at all." When there is light, there is not darkness. The two cannot coexist. They cannot be together. Anne Frank, in her diaries from the World War II days, said, "Look how a single candle can defy and define darkness." So we see, actually, light and darkness can never coexist because darkness isn't really a thing. We see Einstein, who says, what does he say? Darkness is merely the absence of light. So when we have light shine into a room, darkness is dispelled, but not because darkness is a thing that's been overlooked, because darkness is nothing. Darkness is simply the absence of light. And he says you can't study darkness. How can you study darkness? To know how dark a certain place is, you simply measure the amount of light in it. So we see here that darkness and light cannot coexist. So what Jesus is saying here is, if you follow me, there cannot be any darkness in your life. And there'll be no more need to be afraid of the darkness either. See, often we're afraid of the dark, and children often are afraid of the dark, not really because they're afraid of the dark, but just really because they can't see what's there. They're afraid what's in the dark as opposed to afraid of the dark, right? And so Jesus is saying, don't be afraid. I am the light of the world. And there's this quote that I'll just simply paraphrase because I can't remember exactly where it was, but it's, if you fear God, you'll fear nothing else. But if you don't fear God, you'll fear everything else. If you fear God, you will fear nothing else because he's the light of the world. But if you don't fear God, you will fear everything else. And in order for us to fear God, we have to walk and follow him. And when we walk and follow him, we must not allow any darkness to be in our lives. So here's a question I'm going to turn to you now. Is there any darkness in your lives? Is there any darkness? Is there any crevice of your life, of your heart, where actually you have not allowed Jesus into? Jesus, being the light of the world, is desiring to not only give you life, is not only desiring to reveal to your path, but he's also desiring to cleanse. Is there a part of you? Is there something that you are not willing to let go of? Because as children of God, as we follow the light of the world, when we follow him, we must not walk in darkness. Through this last month, I've been just going through the book of Philippians and just memorizing it and just trying to meditate on it. And there's this passage in Philippians 2 that's just really hit me. And it says, "Do all things without grumbling, so that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. Are we all agreed that we live in a crooked and twisted generation right now? And yet God is calling us and saying, we are children of God without blemish in the midst of this crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. See, when God shines on you, the darkness is dispelled. You must look different. Just before service here, I think one of our dear sisters was just talking about everything that's happening in this world, and she's saying, for those of us who are believers, we must look different. We are children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation. We have the light of the world. We fear God. And because of that, we fear nothing else, because we know that God is on our side. So the question here is this, and this one has been convicting me. During this time in Hong Kong, during this time in the world, how different do we look to the next person? How different do you look to the next person? Are you a child of God without blemish in the midst of this crooked and twisted generation? Are you shining as a light in the world? That's a hard question to ponder on. Because so often I find whenever I'm meeting people, I'm just complaining, I'm grumbling, I'm just frustrated at what's happening, I'm feeling hopeless, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling sad. Now, of course, all those emotions are true, but yet, and they're right to have. But still, there must be something that separates us if we have the light of the world in us. We must have this difference that shines through us, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So it's not just visually seeing this path now because we have the light in the world, because we're following him, but we also have to morally live it out. Wouldn't I love just to have a pair of special goggles that had a special light that could see exactly where COVID and exactly where Omicron was, and all the surfaces that we're walking around, and all the people that we meet, that we can see just Omicron just waiting to pounce on us? Wouldn't I love to have that light to reveal to us? And yet another element of light is UV light that's often used to disinfect. And in some ways, it reminds me that Jesus, when he says he wants to shine his light into your life, he's also desiring to shine and kill away all the things that are not of him. The question is, are there some things that we are actually holding on to? This light of the world that is revealing and cleansing. Do we really allow it to shine into every aspect of our lives? Or is there some sin? Because if you're a follower of Christ, if you are a believer and follower of the light of the world, we will not walk in darkness. And I want to challenge you, brothers and sisters, if there's anything that is holding on to you, if there is any sin that isn't of God, anything that you're tempted to do when you're on your own, giving in to fleshly desires, or when you look at someone who has something you want and the envy that comes out, or when you look at a certain group of people or a certain person, you're filled with this anger that isn't a righteous anger. Do you have this in your heart? Because if you follow the light of the world, you must not walk in that darkness any longer. Open yourself up and allow him to create in you a clean, a new heart, renew the right spirit in you, to shine that light into your lives, because he is the light of the world. And finally, so it was the past element, there's a present element, and finally, there's a future element. He says, what I'm saying is true because, one, I know where I came from, and two, I know where I'm going. So there's a future element to this as well. So what is that? What is he saying? What is he thinking about when he's saying, I'm the light of the world, and there is a future element? Imagine being able to know the beginning and the end of your story. Well, not just your story. Imagine being able to know the beginning and end of this whole story here. And that's Jesus' vantage point. And he's saying, I'm the light of the world, and I know where I'm going. And where am I going? You don't know, but I do. But later it's revealed to us. It's in the book of Revelation. See, the final couple chapters in Revelation almost seem very similar to the very first chapters in Genesis. There's a new creation that's being created. And at the very end here, he's talking about another new creation. This is where he's going. Revelation 21. And I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb. And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and its lamp is the Lamb. By its light will the nations walk, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it, and its gates will never be shut by day, and there will be no night there. And then in 22 it says this, and night will be no more. They will need no light or lamp or sun, For the Lord God will be their light, and they will reign forever and ever. Let's just stop there for a second. That this new earth, this new heaven that Jesus again is going to speak into existence will have no night. There will be no darkness. His light will shine across the whole thing. Those of us who like sleeping a lot maybe will receive that as bad news, but I'm sure the Lord will help us in that regard. There will be no night there. There will be no darkness. That's what Jesus is saying when he's saying, I am the light of the world. There is going to be a place where I'm going to transform your lowly body to be like my glorious body. And you will not need light anymore. You will not need your phones to light things anymore, because I am the light of the world. And I, just like I have powered this whole world that you've lived here, I will power this new heaven and this new earth. So those who embrace the life of Jesus here will receive this resurrected life of his, where there will be no more pain, there will be no more suffering, there will be no more sickness or death. Travel restrictions will finally be removed. He is the light of the world, both past, present, and future. And then the Apostle Paul says, for God who said, let light shine out of darkness, has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. The light that we'll need forever and ever will emanate from Jesus himself. This promise of Jesus will be fulfilled. He's promised us that we will never walk in darkness anymore. Those valleys of the shadow of death will be gone. That, brothers and sisters, that fact, that future element should be all we need to navigate life now. When we are filled with hopelessness, when we are frustrated, when we don't know where the future goes, we know someone who does. He knows where he came from and he knows where he's going. And that should light up your life. That should give you life. That should purify you. That should reveal to you what to do next. Because Jesus is the one that is living within us. So the question really is, okay, there's this abstract big concept. It's holistic and it's specific. But what does it mean for us right now? Those of us who are living in Hong Kong, believers, followers of Christ. What does it mean for us? Because it's interesting here is not only does he say that he is the light of the world, in Matthew, it also says you are the light of the world. Jesus himself, after declaring he is the light of the world, then says, actually, you know what, followers of me, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. So whilst Jesus has just declared to them and to all of us right now, I am the light of the world, both all past, present, and future. You also are the light of the world right now. You are the light of the world right now. You see, we are all agreed that we live in a dark time. But yet the question really isn't, oh, we're living in a dark time. How can we save ourselves? The question is, why has God placed us here? The question is, why has God allowed us for such a time as this to be living here in Hong Kong, where it does seem to be getting darker? But then the question isn't it, God, what am I doing here? The question is, God, are you here? And what can I do? You are the light of the world. And then you've said that I am the light of the world. You living in me. Now I'm supposed to let my light shine before others so they'll see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. That we shouldn't be strapped with fear. Going back to that point, we must look different. And this is where we as the church need to repent. We need to reflect. What has God allowed us to do here right now? What is he calling us to do? When he's telling us that we are the light of the world, what does he need us to do? Because we must be different. Because we are children of God without blemish, living in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation among whom we shine as lights in the world. So let them see our good works and give glory to our Father in heaven. I'll finish with this other passage that I've been reflecting on in the book of Mark, chapter 4. Jesus, after doing some miracles, then tells them, hey, let's go to the other side. Let's go into the lake. And then he's setting them up, really. They go into the boat and they go into the lake. He takes a nap. And then what happens? The storm kicks off. And they freak out. And they don't know what to do. And then they go to him and go, Jesus, what, don't you care about us? We're going to die. Are you going to let us die? And then, of course, he wakes up from his nap. And then he says, peace, be still. And he rebukes the wind and waves. And it all completely stops. And, I was mulling that over. And recently someone revealed to me something that I'd never actually seen before in that passage. You can go to it if you want to. Mark chapter 4, that story of Jesus calming the storm. I think it's verse 36. I'll look for it now. And it says this. And so they get in the boat and they go out into the lake. And then there's this few words and it says, and there were other boats there also. And I just froze when someone revealed that to me. I was like, man, I'm like the disciples of Jesus who were on that boat and freaking out at Jesus, saying, why don't you care about us? Why aren't you helping us? We're going to die. Don't you care? I'm so engrossed in my own thing, in my own survival. And I neglected to see that actually on that lake, there are other boats as well. Can you imagine the people in those other boats? Believers, the church, followers of Christ. Can you imagine? Do you think about the people in those other boats? If we were freaking out and we had Jesus in our boat, can you imagine what they're going through? So here's the thing. We have Jesus in our boat. We should not be afraid. But he's now calling us saying, hey, look, I'm the light of the world and you've seen how I live. I need you to do the same. In the same way, let your light shine before others, because there are so many out there who do not have me in their boat. And believers, let our hearts break for that. The panic that we feel, again, it's not wrong that we feel this anxiety. But let us take that to Jesus and say, Jesus, I completely trust in you. Help me look different. Help me to be your child and in this world and still be able to shine your light. Because I know that there are other people out there who are really afraid, who don't know you, who don't have you in their boats. Let us be different. And that's the thing that I've been encouraging myself. What can we do during a time like this? And my prayer is that any interaction I have, any conversation I have, any walk I get to go on with someone, any lunch I get to meet with someone, let me be different. Let me shine his light. Let me not join in the grumbling. Let me not join in the fear-mongering. Let me shine his light. Because I recognize how big a deal that is, that he is the light of the world in the very beginning, and he will be at the very end. And we are assured of that reality. So let us live now in being the light of the world here, in the lives that God has placed us in this city that he's placed us in. Let us be the light of the world so that others may see our good works, the others may see how we live and give glory to our Father who is out in heaven. Because I read this I saw this online, and it was just a kind of funny meme that really got me thinking. It was like, we all keep saying we're in the same boat. And the meme was, actually, no, we're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm, but we're all in different boats. So have some compassion on people. We are all in the same storm, but we are not all in the same boat. Jesus is in our boat. So let's get our acts together. Let's understand who he is and that he can be trusted. And let us help those who are in the boats where they don't have him in. Let the church arise. Let the church wake up to the fact that we are placed here for a reason. And let us not lose heart, because whilst our outer selves are wasting away, our inner selves are being renewed day by day by the light of the world, so that the light momentary afflictions here are nothing compared to the eternal weight of glory that awaits. Let us hold that light, however small right now, and pray that the Spirit would protect our small light and allow it to shine, just as those children sing that song. Let this light shine. Let me pray. Jesus, we bow before you. You are the light of the world. It's in you we live and move and have our being. You give us life. And yet so often we just live just in fear. Forgive us, Lord. Forgive us because we've forgotten the magnitude of who you are. Even the wind and the waves, even COVID waves, will obey you. And yet right now our duty, our job is to just turn our eyes to you, to put our faith in you. And Jesus, we open ourselves up to you. If there is any darkness in us, would you shine your light into the parts of our hearts where you are not, and cleanse us from the inside out, and show us the way to walk now. Reveal to us the path. And Lord, reinstill a hope in us. Reinstill a faith in us where we keep our eyes on what is to come, the future that is to come. We may not know what tomorrow holds, but we know the one who holds tomorrow. We know the one who was there at the very beginning and will be there at the very end. Fill us with hope, fill us with your light, and let us not cover our own light, have it hidden. Let our light shine. Everything that we do, the center of our very being. Thank you. In your name we pray.